everyone, my name is Natalie. Today I wanted to do my August wrap up. So the first book that I finished in August was actually one that I finished while I was still in Italy. Balladen om Marie Kroyer by Anastassia Arnold. So I think this is a Danish writer. Basically a biography of Marie Kroyer, who was a woman who wanted to become an artist or a painter. She grew up with a lot of possibilities. She grew up quite wealthy and ended up marrying a man called P.S. Kroyer, who was very popular and well known for his paintings of Skagen. Even though she wanted to pursue art, that sort of at the beginning she was still trying to do that with being married to him, but eventually that just sort of went out the window. She left him for another man called Hugo Alfvén, who was a Swedish musical composer, and he wasn't a very nice man either, although he was also really known for his art. This biography is basically about a woman who had all of the potential of becoming someone well known for her own art, and that a lot of people praised her work in the beginning, but that she just ended up becoming this shadowy figure to both men. I ended up feeling quite engaged in her life and in her relationships with fairly awful people, but also she had a lot of interesting friends as well. Some women who were artists and actually did make it. It's also sort of a portrait of that time and how women were still at a loss for a lot of the legal rights and just general rights that made their lives fairly hard to live and to be free. I liked this for the engaging story rather than the writing itself. I read it in the Swedish translation, so I'm counting that as my only Women in Translation Month book that I actually finished in a month. The next book I finished was Time Song by Julia Blackburn. Searching for Doggerland. So this was one of the Wainwright books for the I think it made it to the shortlist this year, the Wainwright Prize that I've talked about in several videos. I will link the current playlist in the description. Way back in time when the United Kingdom was still connected to the rest of Europe by land. That place was called Doggerland, and so she's trying to piece together a history of that place and how people were living, what it looked like, based on fossils and other remains that we have. So it's sort of a history, sort of a natural history, in that she's looking at a lot of fossils and trying to read them. The way that the continent is looking now, and sort of the technology that we have now in trying to imagine a different time, so several hundred years ago. There's not a lot of known information about Doggerland, and the pieces that she is trying to use to create a larger picture or a clearer picture, they're so fragmented that it's more about the search itself and her trying to build a narrative around them than a straightforward history of Doggerland. Part of this book is also told in time songs. Basically they are poetry. They are poems that she has written with specific inspirations. The time songs are basically her writing poetry of various pieces, various fragments that she's found along the way of this search to figure out Doggerland. There were parts of it that I really liked, but I will talk more about it hopefully in an actual review video. I feel like I probably have said most of what I wanted to say. The next book I finished was I'm Telling the Truth But I'm Lying by Basie Ickby. I got this as an e-galley by the publisher Harper Perennial. I read the collected Schizophrenias by Esme, Weijun, Wang earlier in the year, which is one of my favorite nonfiction books this year. I had been looking for similar kind of books after that. Bessie Ikpe grew up in Nigeria, and she's talking about that in the first few chapters or essays of this book. In particular, she's talking about sort of heritage of trauma or of disappointment, of various things that families carry, and how the parents' burdens affect a child growing up. Then she moves to America with her parents, and a lot of the rest of the book is about her relationships with other men, her relationships with herself, and trying to cope with her anxiety and bipolar, getting her medication and things like that. So the book feels much more like a memoir than an essay collection. In my opinion, it has a strong enough overall narrative feel to it so that it feels more cohesive in terms of the idea of it, but the entire book is very non-linear. It's very chaotic in the way that it's written, because it feels almost like she's trying to mirror the feelings that she had in growing up with her mental illness, with not trusting her own memory. She describes this in the book as well, that she doesn't remember things as a linear narrative, but rather as moment and emotion and moment. And that is the way this book is written as well, which I think is one of the book's strengths. The way that it's written, forcing you to think along the same lines as she does. I've written a full review of this book, so I will leave that in the description in case you're interested. The last nonfiction book I read this month was Other Minds: The Octopus and the Evolution of Intelligent Life by Peter Godfrey-Smith. I read this with Barbara from Barb's Bookshelf. I will link her Instagram in the description. So we read this together. And I liked it, I think, a lot more than she did. So this book is a popular science book about evolution, and specifically about consciousness, in how consciousness has developed in evolution. So it's looking at the example of the octopus, because octopuses have a really interesting brain and nervous system and intelligence and consciousness themselves, but it's so different from humans. So I think a lot of this book is Godfrey-Smith talking about the way that evolution created two different ways of being conscious. He's talking about various octopus behaviors and goes into those things and talks about the research being done around that. For example, one of the things that he's talking about is the use of color in octopuses, something that I found really interesting, because even in Simon Montgomery's The Soul of an Octopus, that's something that is talked about, and I find fascinating that the octopus is able to create basically any color on their skin, and a lot of patterns as well. They can create this in seconds. Octopuses are actually colorblind, so the color themselves serve in part a way for them to protect themselves, to camouflage, but also to scare off other species. But part of it doesn't seem to have any purpose, because they keep changing the appearance of themselves even in situations when they have nothing to gain from it. Some researchers have made the point that the octopus is using colors as a way to communicate. But the problem with that is that there's no one there to receive the language, if that is the case, because octopuses are not very social beings. So this book is quite a scientific and academic sounding natural history. He looks at the research of octopuses and of various parts of their behavior and their nature. As I said, a lot of this book is about this discussion on consciousness, and that is also a part of that discussion is also separate from the octopus. Although I wouldn't say that this is necessarily easy to read. The contents were really interesting. I was really pleased with this, and it's left me wanting to read more about octopuses and about animals living in the oceans in general. The last book that I finished in August was Paper Girls Volume 1. So this is a series that's about 4 girls who deliver papers in the mornings. And 3 of them have been doing this for a long time, and the 4th meets up with them one morning, and she starts talking to them, and they eventually decide to go on their route together to be safer with some of the creeps in the town. And then basically the apocalypse happens in their town. There are these strange creatures walking the earth, and pretty much everyone they know has gone missing. They're trying to figure out how to deal with this and how to get everyone back, how to figure out how to survive, and all of those things. It's a pretty thrilling first volume, I found. I thought the dynamic within the group was really well portrayed right from the first volume, the way that they fit into the group. I found the story itself interesting and thrilling to read. It's a very quick read because there's a lot going on in just one volume. The art is fantastic. So the art is done by Cliff Chiang, and the color is done by someone else whose name doesn't pop up in my head. I will put the name here. I love the art style of this volume. I think of this comic. I think the art style is such a great contrast to the pretty dooming feeling of the story, that pretty much everything in their world is turned upside down. Nothing feels safe, even their parents are gone, and they're only, I think, 13 years old, so they're very young, because it's done in very bright colors, sort of blue and pink and purple. It's such a nice contrast, so I love that, and I like the art style in general. But I really liked the first volume, and I'm looking forward to reading more of them. I think in general, this feels like a good setup for the story. So that was all I wanted to say today. I hope you have had a good August. Let me know if you've read any of these books, or if you're interested in reading any of them. Also let me know if you read something really great in August, especially if you read something great in terms of women in translation. I would love to know, and I hope you're having a good day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.